Heltai Gaspar. Born 1510 in Nagidisnad, died 1574 in Kolosvar, Transylvania. Prose writer, preacher, printer. Descendant of a Saxon family in Transylvania. Did not begin study of Hungarian language until 1536 but became one of the most important writers of the period. Studied at Wittenberg in 1543 under Melanchthon. Returned to Transylvania in 1544 and became clergyman of Reformed, Evangelical, and Unitarian denominations successively. Became Unitarian about 1569 and in that year defended Unitarianism during a debate with representatives of the Reformed Church in Gyulafehérvár. Took on other responsibilities and produced literary works. In 1550 he became partner of György Hofgraf in printing establishment in Kolosvar. 2 years later the press was functioning under Heltai's name, and after his death his widow continued its operation. From 1560 on owned paper mill. His press and his writings aimed at meeting standards of world literature. Most of his works were based on German and Latin originals but are more than pure translations. Among them are a Rezig Segnek es Tobzodasnik Vezidalmas Valterol Valo Dialogus, 1552, An Attack on Drunkenness and Luxurious Living, Halo, 1570, An Attack on the Inquisition, and Chronica, 1575, a translation of Bonfani's Latin work containing many of Heltai's interpolations. His most important work is his Fabula, 1566, a collection of Aesop's fables, whose episodes he converted into miniature short stories. Heltai Gino. Born August 11, 1871 in Budapest, died September 3, 1957 in Budapest. Novelist, short story writer, dramatist, translator. After completing gymnasium, began career in law but left it for journalism in 1890. On staff of Magyar Hírlap, Pesti Hírlap, Ahet, and others. First poem published when 14. Beginning in 1890 he served as secretary of Vigzínház for a time. Became president of Magyars Inpadi Zerzaki Gyszult and director of Athenaeum Publishers. Lived in Paris, London, Vienna, Berlin, and Constantinople. Awarded Kossuth Prize in 1957. Wrote humorous works, poems, serial stories, novels, plays, cabaret skits, and operettas. Careful portrayer of Budapest and Parisian life in romantic ironic vein. Much attention to bohemian life in spirit of Henry Murger. His novels and plays generally not as valued as his other writings, especially humorous ones. Humor not merely playful but critical of society, man, and ideas. Comedies greatly influenced by French spirit. Unconventional use of words, introduced many new words. One of the creators of music hall song in Hungary. Songs in János Vitez among most widely known of his works. Translated numerous plays for Hungarian stage. Several of his novels have been translated into French, German, Italian, Romanian, Russian, Slovakian, Spanish, and Swedish, a Nemo Levant into English, German, Russian, and Slovakian, a Tunder Lakey Lanyuk into Italian, and some of his short stories and poems into English, French, German, Hebrew, Italian, Japanese, Polish, Portuguese, Romanian, Slovakian, Spanish, and Swedish. Herceg Ferenc. Born September 22, 1863 in Versek, died February 24, 1954 in Budapest. Novelist, short story writer, and dramatist. Family emigrated to Hungary from Silesia. Father mayor of Versek. Attended Piarist gymnasiums in Temesvar 1874 to 1876 and in Zij 1876 to 1878, and National Gymnasium in Fehur Templam 1878 to 1881. Knew German well. Studied law at University of Budapest 1881 to 1884 but spent much time in Versek. Probationary lawyer in Budapest, Versek, and Temesvar but unhappy with profession. Some of his articles and short stories were published in Pesti Hírlap in 1886. Imprisoned 3 months in 1889 for killing an army officer in a duel. Publication of Fen Es Len, 1890, caused literary sensation. Abandoned law studies. Member of Patofi Tarsasig and staff member of Budapesti Hírlap in 1891. Member of Kisfaluti Tarsasig in 1893. Founded UJI Doc in 1895 and edited it until 1944. Corresponding member of Academy in 1899, regular member in 1903, honorary member in 1914. Parliamentary representative from Versek 1896 to 1901 and 1910 to 1918. Vice President of Patofi Tarsasig in 1903, President in 1904 after death of Morjokai, QV. Married Julia Grill in 1906, separated during World War I, moved from Budapest to Vac, returned in 1912. Founded Magyar Figyelő in 1911 in support of István Tiszá's political views. Appointed Director of Army Welfare Service in 1914 by Tisza. Government of Hungarian Soviet Republic removed him from UJI Doc in 1919. Academy submitted his name for Nobel Prize in 1925. At work on memoirs shortly before death. One of the most popular short story writers and novelists of his time, conservative in political outlook. Portrayed world of gentry and supported their views. Ease of presentation and closely knit structure characterize writings. Social novels deal with contemporary life. Novels with historical subject and dramas considered by some to be the best expression of his genius. Many of his novels have been translated into Bulgarian, Czech, Danish, Dutch, English, Estonian, Finnish, French, German, Italian, mainly, Polish, Romanian, Serbian, Spanish, and Turkish, and some of his short stories into Bulgarian, Czech, French, German, Italian, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Slovakian, Spanish, and Swedish. Ilsbella. Born March 22, 1895 in Kassa. Novelist, short story writer, publicist. Father a merchant. Attended schools in Brigzaz and Zaliva, where he learned Ukrainian. Family moved to Budapest in 1909 following failure of father's business. On completion of gymnasium, studied law at University of Budapest and obtained doctorate in 1916. Writings began to appear in Nyugat in 1916. Enlisted in army in 1916 and served on Romanian, Albanian, and Italian fronts. Became member of Revolutionary Soldiers Council in 1918. Served as Director of Cultural Programs and as Political Commander of Armed Forces in Ujapest for Revolutionary Government. Following its demise, he went to Vienna for a short time, then to the Carpathian Ukraine. Became staff member of Kasai Munkas. Forced to leave because of communistic activities and went again to Vienna, where he remained for a year and a half, earning a living as night watchman, news dealer, and movie extra. Ordered to leave Austria in 1923 and went to Moscow. First worked as helper in factory, then participated in cultural activities. Became one of the secretaries of the Soviet Writers' Federation, engaged in international movements of writers. Served as the secretary of World Proletariat Writers for 11 years and then as its general secretary and as editorial board member of Oktyabr and Literatura Postu. Participated in defense of Moscow during World War II and later in campaigns in southeastern Europe with rank of major. Returned to Hungary with Soviet Army in 1945 and participated actively in literary life. Became member of Board of Directors of Magyar Iraq Szövetség and then chief editor of Irodalmi Újság for many years. Discharged from Army as Lieutenant Colonel in 1949. Awarded Kossuth Prize in 1950 and 1955. Now serving as a member of Presidium of Hungarian Writers' Federation. Pioneer of Hungarian socialist realism. Early writings showed influence of expressionism, but realism, in tradition of Kalman Mixuth, QV, appeared and took on character of socialist realism. His novels are generally considered to be the best expression of his ideas and style. Several of his novels have been translated into Bulgarian, Chinese, Czech, Dutch, English, German, Hebrew, Lithuanian, Polish, Romanian, Russian, Slovakian, and Spanish, and editions of his short stories are available in Czech, Polish, Romanian, and Russian. Illyes Endra. Born June 4, 1902 in Ksutortak, dramatist, short story writer, critic. Obtained medical degree but immediately pursued literary career. Became staff member of AZ Est, later of Budapesti Hírlap, for which he edited its literary supplement. Served as director of Revue Irodalmi Intézet for 14 years. Writings began to appear in Nyugat in 1930s. Director of Zapirodalmi Kiadó since 1949 and now president of prose section of Irashovitség. Awarded Adelajasev Prize in 1962 and Kossuth Prize for literary contributions and Ketos Corps in 1963. Stories and dramas based largely on his experiences as medical student and on the life of intellectuals. Catholic and strongly humanistic in outlook. Style simple and direct. Portraits of writers in critical essays are important. Helped to create modern Hungarian social drama by using conventions of salon drama to depict society and to treat his themes satirically. Translated some works of Martin Dugard, Maupassant, Morjak, Stendhal, and André Still. Some of his short stories have been translated into French and German. Illyes Gyaula. Born November 2, 1902 in Raiskrespuszta. Poet, dramatist, critic, translator. Father a monorail machinist. Spent early school years in villages and small towns in Dunántúl. Sent to school in Budapest in 1916. Participated in leftist student movements. Attended meetings of Galilei Circle and Socialist Students Association. Continued to participate in workers' movement after failure of revolutionary government. Forced to leave Hungary in 1920. Went to Vienna, Berlin, and France. Settled in Paris. Participated in workers' movement and literary avant-gardism. Worked as miner, bookbinder, and teacher, also studied literature and psychology at Sorbonne. First writings appeared in short-lived Hungarian emigrant periodicals in Paris. Returned to Raiskrespuszta in 1926, later moved to Budapest. Contributed to Documentum, poems began to appear in Nyugat in 1928. Became close friend of Mihaly Babits, QV. Numerous publications brought him recognition as member of new generation of writers. Awarded Baumgarten Prize 4 times between 1931 and 1936. Through poems and articles he became one of the founders of the populist writers movement in early 1930s. Formed friendship with Adelajasev, QV. Increasing involvement in populist movement resulted in his imprisonment. Helped to edit Belaz during 1930s. Attended Moscow Writers' Conference in 1934 with Lajos Nagy, QV. Became joint editor of Nyugat in 1937 and its editor after death of Babits, then edited its successor, Magyar Szilag, until April 1944. During World War II spent long periods of time hiding in provinces. After 1945 served as parliamentary representative of Nemzeti Paraspart. Edited newly revived Velez 1946 to 1948. Awarded Kossuth Prize in 1948 and 1953. Occasionally a member of Iroshovitsak but gradually withdrew from public scene. Opposed government in October 1956. Now devoting time entirely to writing. One of the most important poets in 20th century Hungarian literature. Poems blend realism and modern verse trends in highly individual manner. Extends poetic language and themes to everyday occurrences. Prose contains images from the folk songs and setting of Transdanubia. His writings are permeated by his experiences with environment of his home village. Strong humanistic outlook and sympathy for the poor. Often struggles with hopes and reality emerging in Hungarian society since end of World War II. Dramas reflect a search for a better life for man. Among the best translators in Hungarian literature, translated works of Eliard, Aragon, and other modern French poets as well as Hugo, Burns, Villon, and Ben Jonson. Made significant contributions to the sociography of peasants. Pustuknip has been translated into Bulgarian, Croatian, Czech, English, French, German, and Slovenian, Ketfurfi into Polish, Patofi into Bulgarian, Croatian, Czech, French, Serbian, and Slovenian, Magyar Netmezek into Bulgarian. An edition of his poems is available in French, and some of his writings have been translated into Italian, Romanian, Russian, and Slovakian. Janis Pananias. Born August 29, 1434 in Ksesmes, died Mary 27, 1472 in Medvevar. Poet. Hungarian name, János Ksesmese. Took Latin name from Pannonia, an area south and west of Danube. Descendant of lesser aristocracy in poor economic circumstances. Raised for a time by widowed mother, beginning in 1447 he attended famous humanistic universities of Ferrara, Padua, and Venice with support of János Vitéz, Bishop of Varad. Studied under Guarino de Verona at Ferrara. Spent 14 years in Italy with interruptions. Began to write poetry while in Italy, mainly panegyrics. Named Canon of Varad in 1454. Obtained doctorate and went on tour of Italy before his return to Hungary in 1458, where he received post in royal chancellery in Buda and soon became Bishop of Pécs, 1459 to 1472. Headed delegation to Rome in 1465 to seek help from Pope Paul II against Turks. Accompanied King Matthias on military expedition to Czechoslovakia in 1468 and then assumed responsibility for defense of southern Hungary. Appointed Viceroy of Slavonia about 1470. Participated in plot against King Matthias and died during escape. Had a very significant role in the development of Hungarian literature. Strong humanist, Hungary's first lyric poet of contemporary note. First to give individuality high place and to view mainly reality and lyricism of Hungarian life. Preserved many experiences of his daily life in numerous epigrams. Expression of personal thoughts highly lyrical. Today his elegiac poetry is more valuable than his earlier poetic creations. He also translated Homer, Plutarch, and Demosthenes into Latin. A volume of his collect works became part of the library of King Matthias. Some of his poems have been translated into Italian. Jikli Zoltan. Born April 24, 1913 in Nagyenid. Poet, novelist, translator. Father was Lajos Aprili, QV. Attended schools in Nagyenid and Kolosvar. Family moved to Budapest in 1924. Completed studies in Hungarian and French at Jevish Collegium. Obtained position at National Zekanai Library in 1935. Poems appeared in Nyugat, Erdei Helican, Velaz, and Zepso in 1930s. Visited Paris and Italy in 1937 and Rome in 1940. Awarded Baumgarten Prize in 1939. Moved to Kolosvar in 1941 and employed by Library of University of Kolosvar. Worked as staff member of Vilagasag 1944 to 1946. Returned to Budapest and again obtained post at National Zekanai Library. At present devoting entire time to writing. Member of so-called third generation of Nyugat schools. Poems elegiac and nostalgic. Concerned with philosophical questions. Early novels based on autobiographical materials, later ones on adventure. Among the best translators in Hungary, has translated some of the works of Dante, Racine, Shakespeare, and Romanian poets. Some of his poems have been translated into German and Polish. Jokai Moore. Born February 18, 1825 in Komárom, died May 5, 1904 in Budapest. Novelist, short story writer, poet, dramatist. Father a lawyer, aristocratic family. Attended Reformed Gymnasium in Komárom. In 1835 was sent to school in Pasane, where he learned German. Resumed studies at home in 1837. Short poem published in Tarsakodo in 1834. Began studies at Reformatus Collegium in Papa in 1841, where his skills in writing and painting distinguished him and he began friendship with Sandor Patofi, QV. Studied law in Kexkmet 1842 to 1844. Law apprentice in 1845, passed examination in 1846, but after winning first case, the success of his first novel caused him to abandon law career. Undertook editorship of Elet Kepek in 1847, with Patofi as best known associate. Became one of leaders in youth activities during March 1848. Married Rosa Laborfalvi in summer 1848. Fled to Debrecen with Kossuth government in 1849. After collapse of revolution he hid for a time in Tardana in Buk Mountains. Returned to Pest in 1850, where he devoted himself to political, editorial, newspaper, and literary activities. Founded Nagy Tukar in 1856, Ustokos in 1858, and Ahan in 1863. Member of Academy in 1858, Kisfaluti Tarsasik in 1860. Parliamentary representative in 1861 and 1865 to 1896 but lessened political and editorial activities in 1880s. Visited Paris twice and Italy several times. Elected first president of Patofi Tarsasik in 1876. Greatly depressed by wife's death in 1886, his care was undertaken for a time by adopted daughter. Married Bella Grosh in 1899. Warmly received by French writers and artists during visit to Paris Exposition in 1900. Continued to write during last years. Most distinguished writer of romantic fiction in Hungary. Established novel as genre in Hungarian literature. So prolific that his works are still not collected into a complete edition. Novels and short stories filled with exotica and fantasy from all ages and parts of world, portray ideal world and express optimistic view to sustain hopes of Hungarians for better life. Power to build legends responsible for romantic views of leading 19th century figures in Hungary and participants in revolution of 1848 to 1849 by which succeeding generations remember them. Does not seek to penetrate character or situation but to weave delightful impressions and to decorate with ever richer colors. Noted for variety and richness of themes, descriptive and structural artistry, and skillful use of language. His short stories are excellent, his poetry, mostly political, inferior, his dramas are of little interest, though numerous. Many of his novels have been translated into Armenian, Bulgarian, Chinese, Croatian, Czech, Danish, Dutch, English, Estonian, Finnish, French, German, mainly, Hebrew, Italian, Latvian, Lithuanian, Polish, Romanian, Russian, Ruthenian, Serbian, Slovakian, Slovenian, Spanish, Swedish, Turkish, and Ukrainian. Editions of his short stories are available in Czech, English, Estonian, Finnish, French, German, Italian, Polish, Serbian, and Swedish. Josica Miklos. Born April 28, 1794 in Turda, died February 27, 1865 in Dresden, Germany. Novelist, short story writer, dramatist. Descendant of ancient aristocratic family. Left studies at Piarist Gymnasium in Kolosvar in 1811 with father's permission to become army officer candidate. In 1812 he left Transylvania with cavalry regiment to campaign against Napoleon in Poland and Italy. Became lieutenant in 1813, first lieutenant in 1814, captain at time of Congress of Vienna. On duty in Paris in 1815. Experimented unsuccessfully with writing dramas in German. Married Erzsébet Calais in 1818. Resigned from army in 1818 and returned to Turda. Lived in Transylvania and Nafkar. Marriage was unhappy. Sought escape in farming and revelry. After 1824 he lived mostly on family estates in Broniewska and Serdok. During 1828 to 1829 his first poems appeared in Felso Magyarzaj Minerva under pseudonym, Gabor F. Moroskaza. Lived in Pest for 6 months in 1831 where he became acquainted with famous writers and politicians, some of whom encouraged him to publish novels he had already written at Serdok. Attended parliamentary session in Transylvania in 1834. Became corresponding member of Academy in 1835 on publication of Irani and Vaslatok. After success of first published novel, Abefi, 1836, devoted energies mainly to writing fiction and occasional drama. Became member of Kisvalidi Tarsasik in 1836, its president in 1842. Became Protestant, and granted divorce in 1847, he married Julia Podmaniski. When Transylvania declared union with Hungary in 1848 he was member of committee named to carry out action. Attended parliamentary session called for July 4, 1848, and became delegate to Upper House. Went to Debrecen with government at end of 1848, and followed it to Zajd and Arad. After failure of revolution fled with wife to Galicia, then to Leipzig. Escaped capture by going to Brussels in May 1850, and lived there under difficult financial circumstances. Wife sold lace, he translated novels into German for income. Moved to Dresden in 1864. Among first important novelists in Hungary. 25 years of creativity produced mainly historical novels, which gained great popularity in period. Also experimented with romantic, adventurous historical novel. Used narrative techniques of Sir Walter Scott. Sought to recreate environment of past. Wrote many dramas and short stories, some in French and German. Complete works in German published in Pest 1839 to 1844. Aksahak Magyarzagon, Azajidi Boshorkanyok, Josica Istvan, and Zirányi, Akolto have been translated into German, Abefi into German and Turkish, Ahudlan Hiv into Czech, Az Yutalso Battery into German and Polish, and Joa Tatar into English, and some of his short stories into German. Josip Adila. Born April 11, 1905 in Budapest, died December 3, 1937 in Balaton Sarzo. Poet, translator. Father a soap maker who left family in 1908 to go to the United States to make money for support of family but got only as far as Romania and never returned. Mother soon forced to board Joseph and a sister with peasant family in Oxford through Orzagos Gyermek Vito Liga. Joseph was 7 when mother was able to support the family herself with earnings from domestic work. Family lived under continuing difficult circumstances, and children were forced to earn money through odd jobs. During World War I, mother's health worsened, and children were often in care of other families. In summer 1918, Joseph spent a few weeks in Ibiza on organized holiday for children. He was writing poetry regularly by this time. Went to relatives in Savitsalas for food, mother dead by the time he returned. At this time his sister, Jolene, married Odin Mackay and undertook care of Joseph and his younger sister. Tried to become deck boy for a time. Joseph was sent to boarding school in Moscow to resume studies, where he was an outstanding student. Worked guarding cornfields during summer. Attempted suicide and abandoned school studies. His poetry gained attention of Giola Juhas, QV, who helped him to publish poems in periodicals and wrote introduction to his first published volume, Zipsake Koljasa, 1922. Became independent financially through work as tutor and laborer, completed gymnasium studies, and entered University of Zich to study Hungarian and French. Left university when professor vowed to use any means to bar him from teaching career because of attitude. Went to Vienna in 1925 with help of brother-in-law to study at university. Became acquainted with emigrant writers, Lehos Kasik, Tibor Duri, Bela Balash, QQV, Gyurgy Lukács, and Ernie who became best friend, and Lehos Hatvany. Shortly after return to Budapest, went to Paris in 1926 with help of Lehos Hatvany. Studied at Sorbonne, became acquainted with works of Marx, Hegel, and Lenin and with workers' movement, and joined Union Anarchist Communist. Returned to Budapest in 1927. Poems were published in many periodicals and dailies, including Nepsava, Pesti Naplo, Nyugat, Atoll, and Korink. Resumed studies briefly at University of Budapest. Formed firm friendship with Giola Illyes, QV. Knew French and German, shorthand, and typing but could not obtain steady employment. Loved girl from middle-class family, but marriage did not take place. Hospitalized at this time because of neurasthenia. Increased political activities at end of 1920s. Joined Socialist Party in 1929 and Communist Party in 1930, for which he conducted seminars and lectures in Ujapest, Angialfold, Rakos Balata, and Ferencváros. Attended illegal meetings and supported workers' cause by his writings. Participated in revolutionary mass demonstration on September L, 1930. Founded periodical, Velocig, in 1932, which was quickly banned by police. Often arrested for political activities. Insisted on combining ideas of Marx and Freud in lectures. Severed connection with Communist Party in 1935 because of differences in views. Already considered as outstanding poet by Deso Kostelany, Mihaly Babits, QQV, Gyurgy Balint, and Gabor Halaj. Broke friendship with Judith Santo. Love affairs continued to be unhappy. Became editor of newly founded Zepso in 1936. Obtained grants from Baumgarten Foundation in 1936 and 1937. Grew increasingly despondent, with sense of being abandoned in alien world. Spent several months in hospital with help of friends. Care undertaken by sisters in Balaton Sarzo. Gave up hope of cure in this isolation and ended life by throwing himself under wheels of passing freight train. Awarded Kossuth Prize for life work in 1948. One of the most important lyric poets in 20th century Hungarian literature. Individuality emerged over long period of time through numerous Hungarian and foreign literary influences. Poems are full of humanism and willpower and of desire for unity with outer world. Socialistic themes stem from love of mankind. Used great variety of poetic forms and techniques with skill. Translated numerous authors, as well as European and African folk poetry, among them, J. Ora, P. Bizruk, J. Wolker, Mayakovsky, S. Yesenin, A. Bloch, Verhaeren, Rambo, and Villain, probably his best. Editions of his poems are available in Bulgarian, Chinese, Croatian, Czech, French, German, Italian, Polish, Romanian, and Russian, and some of his poems have been translated into Arabian, English, Finnish, Hebrew, Slovakian, and Swedish. Juhas Jaiola. Born April 4, 1883 in Zajd, died April 6, 1937 in Zajd. Poet, journalist, teacher. Father and official in telegraph office. Spent most of life in Zajd. Completed studies at Piarist Gymnasium in Zajd and in 1899 entered Piarist Novitiate in Vac. First poems already appearing in Zajidi Naplo. Left novitiate after 6 months because of interest in poetry and unhappy experiences as novice. After years lapse resumed schooling. Father's death strongly affected him, and he again considered becoming priest. With financial help of relatives studied Hungarian and Latin at University of Budapest 1902 to 1906. Became friend of Mihaly Babits, Deso Kosztolanyi, QQV, and Gabor Allah at university and prepared for career as poet. Met Andrade, QV, in 1905. Obtained teaching position at Piarist Gymnasium in Maramarazget in fall 1906. Disappeared from city in February 1907 with apparent intention, unfulfilled, to commit suicide. Nervous condition, which first appeared in summer 1903, kept recurring throughout life. On obtaining teaching certificate he took position with Piarist Gymnasium in Leva in fall of 1907 but after 4 months left for Budapest without notice. Returned to Zajd, lost teaching position, and again considered becoming a priest. Obtained temporary position with Premonstratensian Gymnasium in Nagyvarad, where he became co-founder of a whole nap anthology and met Anna Sarveri, an actress, who inspired much of his love poetry. Lost position in 1911 and obtained position with high school in Sakhalka. Isolation damaged health, he was greatly depressed at time of transfer to high school in Moscow in fall 1913. Shot himself in chest in hotel in Pest on March 6, 1914, but recovered in Rokus Hospital, where he was visited by Julia E. Orsi, a writer, who inspired his poems for several years. Became melancholy again at end of 1916, and in 1917 spent 9 months in Moravcsik Clinic in Budapest. Recovered slowly at home in Zajd and resumed writing at end of February 1918. Participated actively in support of October Revolution in 1918. After failure of revolutionary government he was forced to earn living entirely from writings and newspaper work. Became member of Social Democratic Party. Articles and poems appeared in Munka. Became president of Munkastocker in Zajd and lecturer for workers' seminars. Member of Patofi Tarsasik in 1920. Brought to court in 1925 because of newspaper article he wrote, but charge was dismissed. Visited Vienna in 1926. At end of 1928, he received pension with help of friends, awarded Baumgarten Prize in January 1929. Melancholia intensified, and he spent most of 1929 in Schwarzer Sanatorium and then in psychiatric clinic in Zajd. Awarded Baumgarten Prize again in 1930 and 1931 but withdrew increasingly into himself. Spent last years between home and psychiatric clinic in Zajd. Thoughts turned increasingly to suicide and he ended life by taking Veronal. One of the most important lyric poets in 20th century Hungarian literature. Poems characterized by conflict between Christian consciousness of guilt and pagan longing for life. Early world outlook influenced by Nietzsche, Ibsen, and Tolstoy. saw sorrow in his human condition and that of man. Poems also contained wonder at and longing for life and love for man, which sometimes counteracted his pessimism. Used wide variety of verse forms and made ballad form a villain native in Hungarian poetry. Most important poet of workers' life before Attila Joseph, QV. An edition of his poems is available in Russian, and some of his poems have been translated into Bulgarian, English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Romanian, Serbian, and Slovakian.